Hi everyone, welcome back to Refresher. I'm Denise, and we are in a study this month, about how to have peace instead of chaos at Christmas. I have my tree up this week. It snowed this week. It's been absolutely gorgeous here in East Tennessee. And we have seen the power of God just in the weather. It's just been absolutely amazing. Isn't it just something how when you see a snowstorm come in, it's just an act of God. You see him bringing in the frost and the cold and these snow clouds, and then just dumping that beautiful snow from the sky. It's absolutely gorgeous. I'll see if I can insert a picture here for you to see, but it's just been breathtaking. And as I've been thinking about this thing of having peace instead of chaos at Christmas, doesn't snow just kind of do that? It just quiets everything. It has definitely slowed everything down, because everything had to come to a standstill when the snow came. We have about 9 inches on the ground. It just really surprised everybody, and it's really a gift from God. I'm so thankful for it. But here we are in a study about how to have peace instead of chaos at Christmas time. And last week we began to talk about the fact that one thing that Mary did so wisely is that she did a lot of pondering, considering, thinking through things that were happening, and that's what we must do during the Christmas season. It's obvious, isn't it, that we should be thinking about Christ, because the whole Christmas season is about his birth. But this week I want us to think about maybe what she might have been considering when she was pondering. We're going to look at Luke chapter 2, verses 15 through 19. And before I read that passage to you, I want to just remind us that, every mother that gives birth or has an adoption, or however a child is brought into a home, there is a story that goes with it. There's always a story connected to it. And the mother will repeat that story over. My mother did not know she was going to have twins until about 2 weeks before our birth. Now, she's under 5 feet tall, and so she was very expectant and very uncomfortable and didn't know why. And the doctor, then there was no ultrasound, and so he did an x-ray, found 2 babies, not just 1. So that was a story definitely to be repeated and remembered. But when we look at Mary and looking at how she ponders these things in her heart, she doesn't talk about them. She thinks things through. And oh my, what a story she had. Hers is the most incredible story to ever tell. And today I want us to think about, maybe she might have been thinking about the power of God. I'm going to read in Luke chapter 2, verses 15 through 19. And when the angels had left them, now the angels came to the shepherds. When they had left the shepherds and gone into heaven, the shepherds said one to another, "Let us go to Bethlehem and see this thing which has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. And when they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said. But Mary treasured all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. So Mary is now considering what has just happened. These shepherds came to see the baby, and they tell her that they saw angels in the sky announcing this baby's birth. She's thinking about these things. And as I studied this passage, the word pondered means that she wasn't just thinking about it, but she was guarding it. She was treasuring it in her heart. And she was keeping it there close to herself. And this is a very, very expressive verb. And it tells us that she kept it closely to her heart. You know how you and I, like something will happen and you're like, wait just a minute. He said this and then this happened and you're making a connection. That's what Mary was doing. She was treasuring these things, guarding it in her heart. And then she would compare in her mind with what she had seen herself. And then when her husband to be, Joseph, told her that he had seen an angel. And now then she talks to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth tells her that the babe leaped in her womb when she walked in. And she's making the connection. She's thinking about all these things. And she couldn't quite yet understand everything, but she received it in faith. But look at the power of God that she had seen. The power of God put that seed in her womb. The power of God made the angels come and speak to her and to Joseph and to the shepherds. So she could have been pondering the power of God that she had seen during the birth of Christ. I think, sometimes we might forget the fact that she could have been a little afraid at all these things were happening. We knew that Herod was endangering the child's life, that they were having to be very wise and very careful. She didn't have her mother there at the birth of Christ. Could she have felt a little lonely even? She's displaced from her home at this time. So we have to maybe think that, was she pondering the power of God that she had seen? And whenever you and I get to a place where we are confused or anxious, we have to remind ourselves what we know to be true about our God. And I wonder if Mary wasn't thinking, wait a minute, I can't let myself be afraid because, and then she would go back to what had already happened, what she had seen, what she had heard. So I want us to consider, what might us considering the power of God do for our Christmas to bring peace in our lives? I think that we could realize that we have the power of God to overcome sin's temptation. Now, we think, well, we're talking about the birth of Christ, but isn't that why he came? He came to redeem us from our sin, to buy us out of our sin. And now during the Christmas season, what sin might we be tempted to fall into? Worry. How is this all going to work out? Is everybody going to be able to come? Am I going to be displeasing some in-law or family member? Or what might that tension feel like? And you begin to worry. What about not being content? Thinking, we see beautiful pictures of other people's homes or places they've gone or things they're giving, or we see, advertisements for things, and we can become discontent of what we have. And that is a sin, isn't it? Not to be content with what God has given. What about just complaining? I remember years ago as a young wife feeling so overwhelmed that if Christmas was going to happen, it was going to be because I wrote the cards, I bought the gifts, I wrapped the gifts, I baked the cookies, I decorated the house. And you see the pity and the complaint that was going on? The power of God that brought Christ to earth can give me power over my complaining, over my discontent, over my worry. Yeah, and that brings peace. When we're not in the middle of a sinful situation, we have peace with God. That's why he sent his son. We don't have to sin. 1 Corinthians 10:13, that there is no temptation that is given to us that we cannot overcome, that God gives us the power to overcome that temptation. And so he has the power, and we do not have to sin. Just like Mary saw the power of God in her life, we have the power that we do not have to sin. Secondly, I want us to think that we have the power from God to live the abundant life. Jesus said in John 10:10 that he came to give us life and life abundantly. Mary could look down at this sweet little face of her baby Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. And remember that he had come to fulfill God's promise. And that was to give us eternal life. And that life doesn't start when we get to heaven. It starts the moment we trust Christ as our Savior. We don't have to wait until heaven to live that abundant life. Living that abundant life is living in the understanding of his presence with us. He is God with us. He is here. He is here in the midst of my home. Doesn't that bring peace when we recognize that? He came to give me that abundant life. He came also in that abundance of my life can be fulfilled when I am aware that he is with me to direct my next step. You just stop when there's so many things to do and just say, Lord, you're here. And I just want to acknowledge your presence, and I want you to show me what's the next thing I need to do. And it might not be the thing you've written down. It might be that you need to go and stop and go visit your neighbor. And maybe that'll be the time that you have the opportunity to share the gospel. Realizing that God has given us the power to live for him, we are able to then share the gospel. But we have the power of God to be able to live for him. And because you and I set the tone for our home, we need to know that if we are at peace, then everyone in the house will feel it as well. So we have the power of God to be able to have victory over sin. We have the power of God to be able to live the abundant life. And lastly, I want us to understand that we have the power of God to have rest from fear. Do you find yourself being a fearful person? Just at every little thing that happens, just something jumping up in your heart? John 16:33, Jesus said, in this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. God overrules in our trouble. And when we understand that he has the power to sovereignly step in and provide, to change the situation, to comfort, to convict, to direct our troubles, then we can rest. We can just rest. Mary and Joseph could have felt fear, but thinking on what they had already seen would remind them that they had the power of God to lay their fears aside and have peace. God was caring for them. God was caring for their baby, and they didn't need to be afraid. You and I have to remember the same thing. God is caring for us. He has the power over the things that are fearful in our lives, and we need to lay our fears at his feet. 1 Samuel 12, verse 24 says, only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider how great things he has done for you. Just turn around and look behind you at what God has done. Look how he's protected you. Look how he's provided for you. Look how he has taken care. And remember that God is still on the throne. He's still omnipotent. He still has all power. And we do not have to be afraid. So what are you anxious about tonight, today, this morning? What brings anxiety to your heart? Ponder how you have seen God's power in your life, and then just rest. You'll have peace. So pondering the power of God in our lives this Christmas can keep us from sin. It keeps us living the abundant life, and the power of God gives us rest from fear. And all of those things bring the sweet peace that we sing about at Christmas time. Live in peace instead of chaos this Christmas. I'll see you next week. We're going to look at one more passage and think about something else that Mary could have been pondering in her heart. So you ponder in your heart, treasure and guard in your heart a powerful God who is at work in your life today. Thank you for watching. I will see you next week.